So what really is pixel art? Well, pixel art is a digital art form that is made up with pixels. And you might be thinking, well, any digital image really is made up with pixels, and that is correct. The thing about pixel art is that every pixel on the screen was deliberately placed there by the artist. You might say, well, I can make a selection on an image and fill that in with a color so I don't have to by hand paint every single one of them. Yes, that is true, but you've still made a deliberate decision to fill that area with a certain color, regardless of picking a gradient and filling that in, or using a soft brush or a textured brush and painting in a surface, and not being really picky on where does what fit and what does this pixel look like. If you're a pixel artist creating a pixel art image, you really want to have control over every single pixel. It might sound laborious, but pixel art usually works in tinier sizes. I mean, you can make a full 8 megapixel image, but if you do that in pixel art, I might think that you're a little bit crazy. Still, if you do, show me. That would be awesome to see. Now, what we will create is within small sizes, because I want to make something that pays homage to the old days, or at least is reminiscent of the old days of gaming and game graphics. Now, old computers, old processors, and gaming consoles had their limitations, and they were insane comparing to nowadays standards. If you think about your smartphone, that has more processing power than the computer that actually took us to the moon. So, in a way, pixel art thrived and was born in an era of limitation, size limitation, for example. Screen resolutions were so low that that artists had to make the characters really stand out and be different from each other. So they usually went and make the heads bigger, because you can put a hairstyle or a hair color or a hat or some sort of hair dress on the face. You can really see them blinking and moving their mouth instead of actually seeing all the fingers, which won't serve any sort of cognitive or at least any sort of visual purpose. Now, you take that and you paint colors in there, and you think, how many colors can I use? Well, the machine also tells you that, because some computers or some consoles had very strong color limitations, like only 4 colors in an 8x8 pixel area, for example. So it's no surprise that some characters would be the same color almost, or the same 4 colors from top to bottom, like black, white, and then 2 shades of other colors that you could put in. What else? In a situation like having color and thinking, well, I have little color, this is a limitation. Well, in some cases it was actually quite cool and useful, because instead of having to make more animation frames, you could probably get away with just few. So, for example, walking like this would be just this, and you could still use this frame for a standing animation. So walking would actually just be an extra frame. And because you couldn't see what was the back or the front leg, because the shading on the legs was the same, you really couldn't tell apart that the guy was just moving the same leg to the front. And that was actually quite cool and useful. Now, if you have more colors, that doesn't mean it's worse. It means it's actually better. So if you think, for example, on the amount of shading that you could put in, the volume that you could suggest, or the details, the type of materials, the facial expression or emotion that you could do with having more colors, that would be amazing. Now, if you think that having more colors would be a limitation, or at least would change your style, it doesn't. If you give eight colors to an artist, he will create something completely different from another artist with the same 8 colors, for example, because it's a matter of style, not a matter of technique. Okay, so you might use the same technique, but it doesn't mean that you're going to obey the same style. Another limitation that was very present in the past was the limitation of memory. So instead of having a big image that would take a lot of memory to render, artists would make tiles, tiny bits of images that you would replicate to create the whole world. Think about the ground on a dungeon or on a castle. They would take one tile and actually replicate it, multiply it on the ground. That not only would mean that they would have very little data, but they would spend very little memory. Now, if you wanted a variation, you could rotate it, mirror it. For example, our little guy walking to the left could be a mirrored version of him just walking to the right. So you wouldn't need to create different graphics. Disk size or file size was also very important, because there was a limitation on how much data you could do. So if you think, for example, of a character burning or exploding, instead of having another graphic for him burning, you could use the same graphics and change the colors on the palette. So you'd have a graphic file, a palette file, and then just create another palette file, which is a very tiny file, and change the colors on that. And with the same graphic, you would make a completely different looking image. So again, limitations might be annoying, but I think that limitations are sort of the petri dish for creativity and trickery. And I think that hardware and software are very good at bringing pixel art into evolution or evolving it. But I think that the big responsibles for evolving pixel art were actually pixel artists with their creativity and their trickery.